Marvel, I have a bone to pick. Please stop with the arrow to the heart. You know, it's not a competition, but Superman really leans into this. Love it, love it, love it. Really splitting hairs now. Come on, man. It's like making a joke at a funeral. Good for funerals, not for movies. Not for movies. See Superman. I cannot tell you how much, which gives us this final cumulative score. How good is Fantastic Four First Steps? I mean, actually, using useful metrics. If you could measure its watchability the way you measure a couch in IKEA you're thinking to get. That's what I do here on How Good Is, grading screen story not on dumb thumbs or stars or percents, but against the 7 traits of great movies. These are the 7 ways your brain interprets the story it's experiencing and decides whether it's worth having. So, using our patented How Goodicator, let us find the scientific answer to the searching question,
how good is Fantastic Four First Steps?
A How Good rating is made up of 7 trait scores and an MVP, who we'll get to at the end. The first trait of great movies is the idea. The idea is the concept, the setup, and the unique selling point. It's how the story starts, but also the whole pitch to the audience. Now, Fantastic Four First Steps offers ideas both within the film and without the film. The USP outside the film, well, there's a whole lot going on. First, Marvel's promise to the audience that no homework is required. This is a big sell. You don't have to have seen all the other Marvel movies to understand what's going on, which frankly is the only reason I'm reviewing this film. I would not have stood a chance otherwise. Another big sell to fans after so much disappointment trying to bring these characters to the screen in previous versions is that this one for the first time adheres to the retro-futuristic tone of Jack Kirby's original art from the classic comics. I have a real soft spot for this stuff. I just love it. So, arrow to the heart. And they pull the credibility of this off by making it an alternate reality. So, you buy it. Now, but all that's the pitch and the promise outside the movie. The concept within the film revolves around a little super baby and a Sophie's Choice moment connected to it, which is pretty damn unique and a very, very powerful story engine. Kudos to this. Later we'll talk about whether they pay this setup off, but first the idea score for the concept itself, both within and without the story. So, high marks for the dedication to the 1960s style Jack Kirby Stan Lee comic and for finally servicing Fantastic Four in the way it was originally intended. But what eclipses that for me is the little super baby and the Sophie's Choice, which I've not seen before. So I'm going to give it a chaste. The genre. This is how well the story aligns with its genre, which, along with the idea, is the reason we came. The genre is the promise to deliver on expectations. Good stories deliver and push the genre. Bad ones push it too far. And the worst flat out ignore it. Fantastic Four's genre is, rather obviously, superhero film and action-adventure and arguably Marvel, which is almost a whole subgenre unto itself at this point. In all these categories, it ticks the boxes in terms of delivering on expectations, most especially in the design, which just feels like a love letter to the comics. But did it offer something new? Did it push the genre? Well, push is a strong word. There's something about these films sometimes that feel almost too slick, like a finely polished ad. It sounds weird, but I think the disconnect happens because we are essentially watching a B movie, which is what this really is. And that's not throwing shade. I love B movies. I love them because they do stuff that no other films do, roughly, but that somehow feels more personal and connected. This is counterintuitive, but the magic that happens with movies is partly or largely the separation from our real world. When you look through an SLR lens, you'll see this magic in action. The real world takes on this mythical persona. Same with old film stock in movies. Conversely, the more photorealistic movies become, the more digital takes out all the flaws, the less I am lifted out of my reality. That happened quite a bit with this film. All the corners felt like they were smoothed off. I was kind of yearning for it to be even truer to its B-moviness. You know, it's not a competition, but Superman really leans into this. It's just so playful, just that much more BS. I mean the bat kind, not the bull kind. What does all that mean for its genre score? Ticking all the boxes, but missing some of the nitpicks. So, it has to score highly just by its design alone, but it loses some points, I think, in its slickness. And where does that leave us? It's got to be light. The flow is how much the story feels natural versus contrived, the difference between the story unfolding believably and logically versus being forced to bend awkwardly around where the storyteller wants it to go. A story with good flow feels like it was uncovered rather than written, like it already existed and was just revealed. Fantastic Four's flow. I think this was a well-written script, and especially juggling so many elements inside and outside the movie. Storytellers deserve an award for pulling this off. As a problem-solving exercise, it gets full marks, 100%. But as a story that felt natural to the person watching, well, that was a little more weighed down by said problem-solving. A lot of information has to be conveyed and explained, and it's handled well, and it's necessary, but it's always bad for flow. The very fact that you don't need to do your homework, the promise in the pitch, now becomes an albatross around the movie's neck, which has to catch you up. Then there is how much story there was, and I think there was too much. You can always tell this is happening when really big moments that in another movie would be slowed down and focused on gets rushed over quickly. It's especially noticeable when the emotional reactions of the characters are often rushed past. Emotions are when you stop, so when the movie doesn't, you know it's got too much story. It's got to move on lest it doesn't make its runtime. This is a practical problem and I'm sympathetic to it, and it wasn't major, but it does mess with flow. So, where does that leave its F score? Well, a little low. I don't think it reaches to the heights of Blindly, let alone Brightly. I think it's somewhere between gently and slowly, and I am going to give it, on balance, a gently. Surprise is how fresh the story feels. At this point, everyone's seen a million scenes and heard a million lines of dialogue, so what's new in this story? What moments are different that I haven't seen or heard or experienced before? First thing that springs to mind is the Sophie's Choice central to the story. Love that. Love it, love it, love it. And the whole super baby thing too felt like new territory. I mean, we've seen a little bit of it with the original Superman before, but this felt wholly different, kind of exploring real parent concerns about what kind of person this kid could turn out to be. And the jet age retro-futurism felt like a tall glass of water. I mean, we've seen it in The Incredibles, but that was animated. And in Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow and The Rocketeer, but that was a little more deco-futurism, not to split hairs. And Watchmen and X-Men First Class were kind of more like Cold War futurism. Loki had it, but that's a series. Really splitting hairs now. Look, I loved it, okay? I was relieved to see it. For me, it leans into the true essence of comic books and therefore allows you to buy into everything you're seeing. And bonus points for Galactus. That was cool. So, how does all that shake out? Were there enough surprises in there to give it a high S score? I would say no if it weren't for the Super Baby and Sophie's Choice and Galactus. I would have given it a beside, but for those reasons, I will give it a near. Worry is your emotional investment. You know a story has you by the rocks when you start to worry for a character. It is representative of the whole suspension of disbelief of the story, which is the holy grail, when the reality of the outside world ceases to exist and the story becomes your reality. The toughest of all categories, do you worry about the characters? Do you identify and align with them? Well, that all depends if you're talking about the group or individuals. I have to say I was really drawn to Eben Moss-Bachrach's The Thing, in the way the actor portrayed him, in the way he was realised visually, and especially, fleeting though it was, in his scenes with Natasha Lyonne, who is always great. Joseph Quinn's Johnny also grew on me, but the others, despite the baby storyline being so rich and despite being a huge Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby fan, I didn't rise to the level of worry for them until the very end. Also, Marvel, I have a bone to pick. Please stop with the clever one-liners in high-impact and highly emotional sequences. It just completely undermines our emotional investment. There were several moments in this movie I was in the emotional bubble. I mean, you had me. And then Johnny cracked some sassy line found only in Marvel movies, and pop goes the bubble. It's like making a joke at a funeral. Good for funerals, lifts everyone out of their melancholy, but not for movies. Not for movies. You know, not to compare you to DC, but if you're looking for the right balance with this kind of humour, see Superman. So, how do you score that bowl of spaghetti? Well, let's try. The worry score is somewhere around, it would have been an it, but I'm going to give it an A. It's an A. The payoff is the other half of the idea trait, the bookend to the setup. Okay, so there's this great premise, but did it deliver in the end? Did it stick the landing? And by stick, we mean, was it both unexpected and inevitable, which are the twin poles of every great story. Now, I'm pleased to say that despite the big finale, and relax, no spoilers here, but despite the big finale being typical of a superhero film, come on, you knew this, when it comes to the super baby setup being paid off, the movie gets high marks. I'm in. You have my admiration. I want to take time out to highlight this because it is something very few movies pull off, sticking the landing in a satisfying way. There's no point to making a movie if you cannot deliver in the end, which is the last thing we're left with and the answer to the reason we started watching. Now, I think I have to temper this P score a little on account of a somewhat standard climax, at least visually and action-wise, but they pulled it out of the bag with the emotional story, I think. Victory from the jaws of defeat. So, to the how good-icator, where does all that leave the payoff score? I think high. I'm very impressed. I'm going to give it a silent. Yeah, a silent. Memorability is about impact beyond the story. Some screen stories rock your world, but they evaporate the moment they're over. The great ones, though, stick with you days or weeks or years after, and the very best become part of the culture as touchstones. Memorability. Okay. Was this fun? Yes. Was it a much-needed shot in the arm for Marvel? Totally yes. Was it a huge relief to watch an MCU story that wasn't connected to 50 others? I cannot tell you how much. Has this broken the mold of filmmaking, superhero or otherwise? I'm going to say a friendly no. I can see this being remembered for servicing the Fantastic Four properly for the first time and for kickstarting the next phase of the MCU successfully, and maybe even as the beginning of a successful Fantastic Four franchise, but as a film that people will cherish in their heart of hearts and that enters the culture as something distinct from the brand it is but one medium-sized part of. It is, of course, a prediction, but I don't believe it's that, which doesn't take away anything from how fun it was to watch or how successful it was in the moment. So, all that is to say, its memorability score falls somewhere down around here, not quite as bad as a machine, but I'm going to give it a meadow. The MVP is the person among the creative team who contributed the best storytelling element. All right, on the MVP board, we have the director, Matt Shakman, and screenwriters Josh Friedman, Eric Pearson, Jeff Kaplan, and Ian Springer, who altogether delivered a miracle, a Fantastic Four movie that everyone agrees they like. And I have to put my guy, Eben Moss-Bachrach, on there. But the art, come on, man. I wish I could fit them all on, but the art directors and production design headed by, I believe, Nick Gottschalk and Kazra Farahani, hope I'm pronouncing that right, are represented. And right out of the gate, I have to give this to the designers who created this world, especially production designer Kazra. They are our MVP of Fantastic Four First Steps, which gives us this final cumulative score. When someone asks, how good is Fantastic Four First Steps, you tell them.
Kazra chased light gently near a silent meadow